Hello, and welcome to this Educo Life Sciences trainer interview, where we spoke to our expert medical device trainer, Richard Young. In the interview, we discussed medical device design and development, and specifically asked him about the challenges when transitioning the technical files of legacy products from the Medical Device Directive over to the Medical Device Regulation. We hope you find this interview useful. If you did and you want to stay up to date with the latest Educo interviews, trainer interviews, free Module 1 training sessions, and all of our courses, subscribe on our website.
This is a really weird thing, which is peculiar to the adoption of the new European medical devices regulations. And obviously, there are lots of medical device products out there in the market, and there have been for many, many, many years. And the transitioning is moving these legacy products that have been designed and manufactured for a long period of time into compliance with the new regulations. So the transition is getting these products and making sure that the new state of the art and the new requirements of the regulations are being met by the design and documentation of these products, basically ensuring that legacy products meet state of the art. This is a focus for regulators when they're looking at products. Obviously, a lot of companies have a huge portfolio of products that need to go through this transition potentially. And we need to make sure that it's done correctly because it's expensive to start with, potentially expensive. Often we find, if we do things properly, we find gaps between the documentation of the existing legacy product and where it needs to be to meet the requirements of the regulation during the transition. So we need to understand where those gaps are and what the process is going to be required to move us through that transition to successful registration of that product. And for the manufacturer, that often requires some consideration of those costs and those timings and the commercial viability of conducting that activity. Once that's done, it's ensuring that the resources and plan are in place to actually deliver, addressing all those gaps so that at the end of that process, the compliance with the new regulations is established and we can move forward successfully and not worry about the transition anymore. The biggest problems we've got, or the biggest challenges we've got in transitioning legacy products to compliance with the new regulations is that technology and understanding have moved and changed, both in terms of the regulation itself. Nothing had changed, we wouldn't need a new regulation, and also in terms of the state of the art, our understanding of how we do things now versus how we may have done something 15, 20 years ago. And a great example of that from a standards perspective is how we approach biocompatibility of patient contacting devices now. And the way we approach that and how we document that has changed significantly in the latest version of standards, and bridging that gap between what we have before and what we need to go forwards can often be a bit of a challenge and require maybe additional testing or something like the intervention from a registered toxicologist to conduct an assessment against the new state of the art and allow us to draw a conclusion as to the current status of compliance of that element, that aspect of the product's design and testing. We also have different emphasis on that in there as from a regulatory perspective. There's a great deal of emphasis in the new regulation on clinical evidence. And we will often find that the amount of clinical evidence that's available for a legacy product may be not meeting the expectations the regulators may have now. So there's quite a large gap to not only address that gap, but to maintain that data over the continued life of the product. And those are both potentially big investments that the manufacturer has to do to take things forward. There are many more. Those are two of the big ones, but where we're going here is we need to understand what current state of the art is, and then we need to have a plan, a costed plan that allows us to address these gaps to the point where we can submit the revised product to our notified bodies for assessment and compliance with the new regulations. That's a very good question. Design inputs are massive. Now, in terms of legacy products, often these aren't very well stated as well. So whether it be for a new product development or a legacy product, it's really important to ensure that we've got a complete set of design inputs that unambiguously describe the product. And often, from a consultation point of view, we find a lot of problems in the design and development process and the subsequent regulatory assessment, where the intended purpose, the intended use, the intended user, and the intended use device environment of a device are not adequately expressed in the design of the product. And that's based on the design inputs. Now, we've got many places design inputs can come from. They can come from our users and our customers. They can come from state-of-the-art standards that have performance requirements that we may need to demonstrate compliance against. They could come from standards where safety is being proven by meeting certain levels of performance, like electrical safety is a great example of that. And critically, we might be getting inputs from things like assessment of risk management, from clinical evidence, where we're finding out what has gone wrong before, where risks are, what design features are required for a product that's meeting a particular user need, and also from usability. And that's sort of a really developing area. The usability of our product and our assessment of that is going to drive design inputs and design solutions to ensure that our users can work with our products better than they have maybe with older designs. So yeah, a lot of places we can get design inputs from. They're all critical. We really need to get those right and have a very broad global look at all these sources to make sure that we have the best expression of design inputs possible before we embark on the development of the product, or indeed for the documentation of a legacy product where this may not have been done adequately in the past. So really important step in the design and development of any product, and its ongoing maintenance as well. Yeah, we've mentioned a couple of inputs there now, and there are really two key processes. Well, there are many processes. I'm going to talk about three of them here. We all understand risk management as a process standard, and risk management is a process that we apply to the design and development of the product and throughout the product's entire life cycle. So it's something we continuously work with and update. We're used to that. We've got a couple of other process standards that also have a massive influence that are the basis, if we're submitting products to the FDA, for instance, would be grounds for our submission to absence of evidence we follow these process standards would be grounds for refusal of an application for conformity assessment. Now, the two I'm thinking about here is one we've mentioned already, usability or human factors engineering. The standard for that is IEC 62366. There's two parts to that. It was published in 2015. And that's a process standard, and it dictates how we approach the design process and how we take into consideration the design inputs we're generating from usability concerns, how we're incorporating those and assessing them through risk management, and how we build a body of evidence that we've designed those features of the product correctly throughout the design process, all the way through to the final design validation that demonstrates we've implemented those usability and human factors elements correctly at the end of the process. So it starts from the design inputs and it goes all the way through. And it's one of those standards that's almost impossible to prove compliance with if you try and do it at the end. It's not what it's meant to be. It's meant to be applied through as a process alongside design throughout. Very similar to that as if you're involved in the development of products that contain or are software based. Again, the standard there is IEC 62304. That's the standard that we use for the development of software. And it dictates a process approach. So we start thinking about how we're building the software right from the initial idea of the product, and we produce documentation as evidence that we've gone through the stages as the designs evolved, and to the point where we validate the finished product at the end of the process. Again, both process standards, very, very, very difficult to tack on at the last minute. Something we need to be doing right from the beginning and taking through. And there's good reasons to do that. And they do genuinely, those process standards lead us to much better medical products in the market. I think it's really important when you're looking at either new product development or legacy products development to have a really good understanding of the basics of a design and development process and be able to interpret and manipulate that system and get your inputs right so you can successfully navigate your way through that. And at the end of the day, produce a lot of documented evidence that demonstrates that you've done things properly. And that's, I think, the whole point, whether it's in either case, the whole point of the design and development process is to create several things. One is a load of documentation, evidence, objective evidence that you've taken a systematic approach to the design process. And that's great. That's something that we do for the regulators as evidence, and that's something we put in a design history file. And that's great. We need to be able to do that. But from the course, we also need to understand that the elements of the design process, whether it be the process standards or the central concepts of design itself, aren't just something we're doing just to keep regulators happy. They're actually really good ways of developing products and ensuring that we do things in a systematic and organized manner. And most fundamentally, these are mechanisms that help us record and communicate between team members to ensure that there are no ambiguities and that we conduct these processes to regulator standards, but in the most efficient way we possibly can. So we don't want to miss things. We don't want to forget to do certain actions. And we want to make sure that we're reviewing and ensuring we're doing the best possible job as we go through. And we're transferring, and at the end of the process, we're transferring solid, well-designed products into manufacturing that are going to meet customers' needs. So that's the point of it. Communication, teamwork, documentation. Most important things about it is the communication and teamwork. And if we get that right, we get a good set of documentation in our design history file to keep the regulators happy as well.